So my name is Humair Ahmed. I'm a Senior Technical Product Manager here in NSBU. And here we're going to talk about multi-site with NSX, specifically workload mobility and disaster recovery. Now, when we talk about multi-site, we're really talking about application continuity. And under that, we have several use cases, such as workload mobility, disaster recovery, resource pooling, and also cross-cloud, where you might have on-premise workloads and off-premise workloads. And when we talk about multi-site, there's two types of deployments you typically see out there. One's active standby, and then the other's active-active. So let's start with active standby, and I'll explain how NSX with multi-site, NSX for multi-site works along the way. So when I say active standby, what I'm saying is the application is active only at one site at a time. Whereas active-active, you have active applications at both sites. So here I have two data centers. I have L3 connectivity between them, and I have my active application here at site one. So first thing I do with cross vCenter NSX feature and NSX is I deploy logical networks. And with the cross vCenter NSX feature, we can deploy logical networks across vCenter domains, which may also be across multiple sites. Now, typically, customers who deploy for multi-site will have multiple vCenters. Okay, so this gives us the ability to deploy logical networking across vCenter domains, which could also be across multiple sites. So I deploy my logical switches, universal logical switches, and I also deploy my distributed logical router, again, spanning vCenter domains, and also multiple sites. So what does this do for me? Well, we have consistent networking now across sites. And this is a big thing for things like disaster recovery, workload migration, and so on. Right? For disaster recovery, for example, when my disaster recovery orchestration tool recovers these workloads on the recovery site, I no longer have to map networks. I no longer have to re-IP application, the IP address for the application, right? And you'll see in a minute, it also handles security. So, and that's a big deal, not having to change the IP address, because so much depends on the IP address, right? I mean, you may be using that IP address in security policies on devices such as firewalls, load balancers. You may have ACLs, you may have application dependencies, and so on. So this is solving a lot of those traditional challenges, or challenges you see with traditional solutions. Now, on top of that, we also give you consistent security across sites. So you have one centralized location for configuring your security policies. It gets pushed down to all your sites, consistent security across all your sites. And in effect, what you're getting is microsegmentation across multiple sites, right? Now, as your workloads move from one site to the next, your security policies follow it. And this is solving another challenge with traditional solutions. That is, when your application is recovered at the recovery site, what about the security, right? You don't want to have to manually sync security or recreate your security policies. And if the IP address changes, then now you have to modify your security policies, not only recreate them, but modify them as well. So again, NSX is solving these challenges as well. Now, a lot of traditional solutions you see on there, they're very focused on just the network aspect. Even if it's just simply spanning L2, they're only concerned about the network. What we're doing with NSX is we're providing you a complete platform. So you get networking, consistent security, and a lot of the features around automation and integration with third-party, with other VMware products and other third-party products as well. Now, you have this consistent security, but on top of that, we also allow you to use higher level security constructs, such as security tags. So you don't have to do everything IP-based. Here, basically, I'm saying, hey, apply this security policy to all my workloads that have the app security tag. And for these other workloads that have the web security tag, apply these other policies. So I'm applying these security policies at a higher level, closer to the application, actually. So I create these universal security tags. What happens is it gets synced to my secondary site or my recovery site, so now they're available there. And when these workloads are recovered by your disaster recovery orchestration tool, such as SRM, the tags get applied automatically to the workloads, and the security policies get applied to those respective workloads because of the tags. Okay.
And from an active standby model, you're only paying for active licenses. So from when you think of licensing, right, acquisition, you're only paying for the primary site. So it's only based on active instances. So you can have the whole secondary site prepared with NSX deployed, but it's only, you're basically, it's a one-to-one mapping where the workload lives.
Right.
All of the licensing?
The NSX licensing,
Yeah.
all of it.
So
Well, the last time I talked to you guys, maybe about a year and a half ago, about this capability integrating with vCloud Air service providers in the formerly owned VMware vCloud Air solution. One of the challenges was the mix match between the version of NSX running in your data center and that upon which the vCloud solution is built on. Has that mismatch been solved now? Are we at now N+1, or are we at N level now, or N-1? What's the deal with the versioning?
Okay, yeah, so that's actually something that we are addressing through VMware Cloud on AWS. One of the enhancements there is, so traditionally we've had linked mode, where you need the same versions of vSphere on-prem, and in the service provider environment, we're actually introducing a hybrid mode, which does not have the same dependency, so it will be backwards compatible. So that means you will be able to actually run an older version of vSphere on-prem, and we can actually rev or update the versions in cloud independently, and you'll still be able to support centralized management and cross vCenter NSX. So yeah, there have been some enhancements or developments there.
So on the same piece on the NSX part too. So NSX that's running in my data center, that version 6.3 is running in my data center. Is that also what's running, or the anticipated what's going to be running in the AWS solution, and to what you guys have today in production, the IBM solution is? So if I wanted to do this to IBM today, I should be able to do this to IBM today. That's right. IBM is there. What about vCloud network? Is the vCloud Air network, they're all NSX up to the
at the end of the day, I mean,
NSX?
So for this solution, the customer needs their own vCenter, right? This is so this is an assumption that they have, that they have their own.
Well, I'm not talking about vCenter. I'm speaking more of NSX. So there's the NSX. The challenge circa about a year and a half ago was versions of NSX running the NSX network itself.
Yeah, so the base capabilities, switching, routing, firewalling, will backwards compatible across versions. The only time you would need to upgrade is to take advantage of new features, maybe like the tagging that we introduced. But the core capabilities will run in backwards compatible mode.
Yeah.
But isn't vCloud Air being sold to a French provider?
So there's vCloud Air Network, which is all the partners who have taken our stack and our hosting as a managed vSphere or a full vCloud Director implementation. And yes, you're correct. VMware had its own version of it that we had kind of built, which was vCloud Air, and that has been sold to OVH. But the vCloud Air network is where we are focusing. And so as a result, our strategy is to take the stack and deliver it to our partners. And we see two types of deployments. One will be kind of like a managed VMware Cloud Foundation as a service, right, where they're taking vSphere, NSX, vSAN, and delivering that. And another one is like a multi-tenant service provider where they're providing VM as a service, which is where we are. And in all of those elements, you have NSX connected in there.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
So yeah, so it's a good question. This is a matter of administrative domain, right? As long as you have administrative domain, you can do cross VC. So cross vCenter NSX. So in this case, I'm showing on-premise, right? Now, a data center on the other end could, well be, on the cloud, right? So in this case, it could be, a physical data center, or it could be a data center, sitting on the cloud, such as the IBM, right? So now next I'm deploying my edges. And so I have my active application on site 1, and it's using initially, the application is active here, and it's using the edges at site 1. So now if I have a full application failure, or even a site failure, my disaster recovery orchestration tool recovers those workloads at site 2, the tags get automatically applied to those workloads, and the security policies are in place also for those workloads. And you have the consistent IP, so the IP address doesn't change. Okay. Now, the other model you'll see for multi-site is active-active. And we also support this model. And this is, again, you get all the benefits of NSX, consistent networking and consistent security, right? But here, the difference is the application is active at both Site 1 and Site 2. And one of the additional benefits of NSX here is the simplicity and the flexibility you get in how you deploy multi-site solutions. So for example, I have applications at both sites here, and I can configure it so applications running at both sites use my edges at Site 1 for north-south connectivity, or I can configure it to say, okay, if the application is at Site 1, use the Site 1 edges. If it's at Site 2, use the Site 2 edges. And if that application at Site 1 moves to Site 2, then use the edges that are local to that site.
Are there any explicit latency requirements?
The only latency requirements for the DCI is, well, for enhanced vMotion, right? It's 150 milliseconds. And then that's in line with our NSX control plane, which is also 150 milliseconds. And of course, there's an MTU requirement for VXLAN. Okay? And these edges, again, can be deployed in ECMP mode or in HA mode, providing stateful services such as edge firewall, load balancer, NAT, and so on. So really what NSX is doing here is it's providing inner data center connectivity for things like workload mobility, resource pooling, and disaster recovery. So now on demand, I can move workloads from one data center to another. And really, at the end of the day, what we're doing is we're enabling you to build solutions with NSX. So you have your core infrastructure here, you have your vCenters, you have your NSX deployed at both sites, and now you can start deploying additional types of applications or services to build out your solution. You have consistent networking and security, but let's say you need application level security. You can deploy Palo Alto at both sites, right? Then you can deploy SRM for disaster recovery. Now, for your VMware VM storage replication, you can deploy vSphere replication, right? So you can see we're building out this entire solution. So NSX is the platform that provides that consistent security and that consistent networking. But now I can get layer 7 application level security, right? I get SRM for disaster recovery. I can put on vSphere replication, and I'm building out a whole solution. And that's what really it's about at the end of the day, right? Solving a problem and providing a solution. So with all this enabled, we can easily do things like disaster recovery, right? So now I mentioned a couple things with NSX, a couple benefits. First, there's that consistent networking and security, right? Second, there's a higher level security constructs you can use, like security tags. Third, I said there's the simplicity and flexibility in deploying these multi-site solutions. Now, depending on the solution you deploy, there's also some additional benefits. For example, with disaster recovery here, one of the challenges with disaster recovery is being able to test your disaster recovery plan. And with NSX, this NSX actually helps a lot with this particular problem. So here I have my production network. Okay, here's my production application. So with NSX, I can very easily replicate that entire network, including the subnets, and create an isolated test environment. Okay? So now from my disaster recovery orchestration tools, such as SRM, I can run a test, and I can bring up basically placeholder VMs on these test networks and test my disaster recovery plan without any disruption to the production environment or the production application.
How do you test that? Like, how does a client access, or you access that environment to actually test those applications?
Sure. So a couple things. If you're just wanting to test east-west, right? East-west connectivity, and your clients are also perhaps maybe in this area, or you're just testing connectivity between applications, you would just create an isolated environment, distributed router, and your logical networks. These are isolated so you can easily test. Now, if you also want north-south connectivity, then you also have to basically replicate that environment. And with NSX, you can also do that, just deploy, you can deploy another edge. And then on the physical network, you would have to, handle it there, right? That would be the challenge on the physical network if you wanted that to test that connectivity.
You do some sort of NAT north-south.
You could, or you could do something like on your physical network, a lot of people already have like VRFs. You can tie that VRF to a specific LAN. So in the virtual environment, your overlapping IPs are basically handled by this isolated environment. Once you get into the physical, you're tying those specific VLANs to basically VRFs, right? Okay, so let me show you a demo of this. And basically, I'm going to show you this entire NSX SRM solution, and I'll also show you how you can achieve this. So here I have two sites. You can see I have Palo Alto and I have San Jose. And this site is my primary site. You can see I have my web VM here on this universal web logical switch, my app VM here on a different subnet on this universal app logical switch, and my database VM on a different subnet on this database universal logical switch. Okay, so if I go to my web universal, I'm just going to console in here, and I'm just going to ping the app VM just to make sure initially connectivity is good. The web VM can ping app VM, and I'll do the same thing between the app and the database. So here you can see this is the app VM, same subnet that I showed prior, and I'm going to ping the database. So again, connectivity is good. So again, this is my primary data center. I'm going to go down to my San Jose data center. And you'll see here I actually have those placeholder VMs that SRM has created. So you can see here it's managed by Site Recovery Manager, the web VM. I have the app VM and the database VM. These are just placeholder VMs, okay, that SRM creates once you put those workloads into a protection group, right? And I'm using vSphere replication. So here I'm going to vSphere replication. You can see my two vCenters, and you can see there's 3 VMs being replicated, okay? Now, if I go deeper in and look at what those VMs are, you'll see it's my 3-tier application. So from the primary to the secondary, I'm replicating these VMs. So here I'm going to go to Site Recovery Manager, and under Sites, here's where I'm doing my mapping. And you'll see the same network is both at the primary and the recovery site. It's the same VNI because I'm stretching that VXLAN L2 over L3 across sites. So again, workloads will recover on the same network, same IP addresses. Now, on my test network, this is what I was showing you in the diagram. You'll see I also created test networks, test universal logical switches. And that's what I was saying. It's very easy to test your DR plan with NSX. So now if I go to my networking and security and I just look at my logical switches, you'll see on my primary NSX manager, I have my production logical switches for my web, app, and database tiers. And I also have these test networks I created for all of those tiers. Just with a click of a mouse, you can easily create these test applications. Think about doing that in the physical environment. You would be creating VLANs, VRFs, all of this on the physical network, right? So now you can see I'm in my production DLR, and I've connected my production logical switches. Right? And now I'm going to go to my test DLR, which I created. And I've connected my test logical switches. Now I'm showing you this very quickly, but this is literally just wiping off hours and hours of work, right? If you did this on the physical network. But I'm making it look very easy here. So I'm going to SRM now. And you'll see my protection group. My protection group for my tenant 1 application is associated with this recovery plan I created in SRM. If I look at the virtual machines, I can see my 3-tier application. So once they're in that protection group, vSphere replication is basically replicating those VMs.
If you're using Zerto or something better than
you
SRM, it would work roughly the same.
Yeah. So here I'm going to my recovery plan. and I see my tenant 1 application, and I see my virtual machines here. Okay? And I can also bring up these VMs in priority. I want my database to come up, then my app, then my web. So when my web services come up, all the backend services are already there. Right? So again, big takeaways here is we're providing you a solution right here. It's not just like piecemeal. This is everything you need right here. So I go to my DR plan and I started running it. So I'm testing it now. So now we should see those workloads come up on those test logical networks. Okay? So I'm going to go back. I'm going to go to my hosts and clusters. And remember those VMs at Site 2 that were being managed by SRM? We should see them coming up now on the test logical networks. So here, my web VM, you can see it's come up on my test web logical network, same exact IP address. Same with my app, come up on the test app network. Same with my database, it's come up on the test. And again, remember, my production app is still running. No effect to my production environment. And that's the challenges, that's one of the key challenges people have, is testing their disaster recovery plan. So here I'm just gonna console into my web VM, and I'm gonna ping my app VM, and we're gonna test, right? So again, you often see this, outages, site outages, and the company has a DR plan and a DR tool, and you're like, what happened, right? How can this happen if they have a disaster recovery solution? The answer is they never really adequately tested it, right? So what NSX does is it gives you all this ability, networking and security, and you can see here, as I'm talking, the pinging is going through, so the application is recovered, right? So now I'm gonna go into my app VM and I'm gonna ping the database, and you'll see that's also working. So it's recovered on the secondary site. But going back to what I was saying, NSX is providing you that consistent networking and security, higher level security constructs like security tags. It's also giving you simplicity and flexibility in how you deploy multi-site solutions, right, as we talked about. And with disaster recovery, it's also giving you this ability to very quickly create these test networks. I mean, think about if you have thousands of applications that you want to do testing on, right? How hard it would be to do that on the physical environment. You'd be creating, all these test, physical VLANs, unless you're going to test them and, in a maintenance period where you're going to affect your production environment, right? So NSX is solving all of these problems for you, and those are four key things I mentioned, 4 key takeaways here, right? Consistent security, consistent networking, higher level security constructs, right? Ease of simplicity and flexibility in the multi-site solutions. And number 4, easily test your disaster recovery solutions.